All right, folks, welcome back. As I was saying actually a moment ago, this week is a little bit of a shorter study. I only assigned one chapter, and it's kind of more of a transition because last week there was a lot, and next week there's going to be a lot, but I did feel like we needed to touch on the information in chapter 9. I know I've already talked to a few of you. We've read a whole host of other things. Um, so well, I'll try to keep us together. In what we're talking about today. So just let's do a quick refresher before we get started about what happened last week. So, do you all remember, for those who were with us, what was last week?
A lot of battles,
Yes.
Mhm.
and David was winning them.
Yep. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning.
We're just getting ourselves rolling with a refresher of last week. So, do you all remember the big event that happened?
Well, they moved the what's its name?
Ark.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
There we go. So, what we have, the situation that we've set up is, so David started off and was initially just king of Judah, which is just the
Yeah.
one clan. And then we read about all the infighting back and forth with Saul's heir, with the heir to the throne, one of Saul's younger sons, and he eventually defects because he, after making an accusation to one of his generals, that doesn't go well, and then he's losing the battles, and so eventually swears fealty to David. David is king, crowned of all of Israel, the whole shebang and shaboodle. And afterwards, David gets the idea that, hey, since I'm king of this whole region, I'm going to bring the holy object to the city he set up, which is Jerusalem. He conquered Jerusalem, turned it from a pagan city into an Israelite city. He danced in front of the ark, bringing it into town. But then we wrapped up last time with David being worried of like, oh no, I'm in this fancy house. God's in a tent. He vows to make a house for God, and God says, I've been in a tent for a long time. I am going to make you a house, i.e., a dynasty. And so there's a bunch of promises that, as we talked about, kind of relate back in our echoes of the promises that were made in Genesis to Abraham and Abraham's descendants. And so we got through all of that, but now what I'm going to give you a brief run through of what happens in 8, just so we're staying. I didn't have you all read it. If you did, congratulations. 8 is about David's wars. So pretty much immediately David goes to battle. Surprise, surprise, David wins. It's again and again, it's just like David winning, doing certain things, hamstringing armies. The Lord gives it into David's hands. He takes some of it, dedicates some of it to God. He's doing the things he's supposed to be doing. There is one king in the area that likes David and is on his side, and so he sends his son to say, hey, congratulations, but it's also almost like creating a partnership. And so this son is kind of keeping friendly terms between these two groups. And in 13 it says David won a name for himself, and the Lord's granting him victory. So he's doing a good job on the warrior king front. The last thing that I'll bring up in 8 that I did find interesting is if you go to chapter 8, verse 15. I didn't assign it, so we're just going to walk through it really briefly together. We get a list of David's officers. This is in a way the first time we've kind of gotten a look into the kind of the background of what is going on not on the page. So 15 says, David reigned all of Israel. David administered justice and equity to all of his people. So that is a resounding, David's doing a good job. He's being a just king. That's kind of his reputation, is that David deals well with people. But then we get the name of his general. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over all the army. So they recorded his general. Jehoshaphat, son of Elihu, was the recorder. So that is the military person who's taking notes on these military campaigns. We actually get the name of the person who is taking notes, which is the first time we've ever gotten that. We have Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Elimelech, son of Abithar, were the priests. So it is unique in a way that David has two high priests. It's typically other places we have one with subordinate priests, but it is indicating that these two are jointly high priests. The one thing that is additionally interesting is Ahimelech, son of Abithar. Abithar is David's personal priest. If you remember in the stories back, there was a point where King Saul killed a bunch of priests, and there was one survivor that ran to David. That's Abithar. And so Abithar is in David's court. He actually lives long enough to be in Solomon's court. And there's things that happen with Solomon, but just know that this man is alive, and David made his son head priest. So you can see some of the in workings of things that it does seem like David is doling out favors to people he likes. Just reading between the lines. But then we get Sariah was secretary, which the implication is that is kind of like the royal scribe. This is the person writing David's personal records and personal notes. And so many of these stories may relate back to Sariah, who is in the court taking notes, which I think we've often kind of wondered about, like, okay, where are these stories coming from? Who's recording them? Why are they so obsessed with numbers? Well, we got one guy recording the numbers for military and this guy recording the stories of the court. So we get like the record, like we're starting to see where these records are coming from. We have Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, who was over the two groups of people that I'm not going to try to pronounce. These are David's bodyguards, and evidently they are the words are Greek in origin, which shows that he may be getting bodyguards from other groups, which is not uncommon. So these are probably well-trained warriors that may be from somewhere in the Mediterranean. The words just look Greek, not Hebrew. And then lastly, David's sons were priests. And this is just interesting because this actually shows that the priesthood at one point in time was more open, because David's not a Levite. But this shows that at least in this time, there was priests that weren't Levites here. So I just wanted to walk through that, just not because there's really take-home lessons, but there's kind of morsels that show what's going on behind the curtain. So any thoughts on that little section and some of the names or people? Anything surprising there?
Well, when he says he's ministering justice and equity, it's only his own people. So all the rules about being not murdering and all of that only apply to your people, not
Right.
to anybody else.
You're right. That in a way, being a king in this time was serving the people that you were tasked over.
Yes.
And so in some ways it makes sense that the rules and the laws that they are given are just for the people of Israel, because in a similar way, if you are elected to be the governor of Michigan, it would be inappropriate to make rules for Ohio.
But you're also not supposed to kill them.
Right.
I'm a little
But
preoccupied with that.
the United States has no problem administering death to people in
Other
other
people.
countries. So
I know.
we still do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
it's more violent. If you read 8 and 10, you will see times where they try to talk and things just go to violence very quickly. So I won't say he doesn't try to talk first, but the justice is specifically the people below him.
Mhm, mhm.
But that brings us to the part that I actually assigned for you all today is chapter 9, David's kindness. I don't know if you all struggled to pronounce this name. I had to go slowly. It is Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth. This character came up in chapter 4, when Saul's people were fleeing. Mephiz, Mephizo. I'm going to struggle with this one, guys. Mephibosheth was dropped as a child, and his nursemaid broke both of his legs, so he is crippled. He is the son of Jonathan. And his name was actually, we got this in chapter 4, his name was changed. It originally was Mehivbal, which means out of the mouth of the Lord, but was changed to Mephibosheth, which means out of the mouth of shame. So his name was basically changed to shameful, maybe because he was crippled, maybe because he was the grandson of a dishonored king. At any rate, our story today begins with David asking, is there anyone else out there left from the house of Saul who I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake? So what do you think of this initial question? He is throwing out the name of his best friend who has passed away, asking about his relatives. Do we trust David? Is David showing loyalty? Is there other motivations? What do you all think is going on with this question?
I don't know what's really going on, but it felt creepy to me, and I'm not sure why.
Felt creepy.
Creepy in so far as I don't trust David at all, and I know he's up to something, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just to make himself look good. I don't know, but it's not because he has pure love. I don't think. I just don't trust him.
Okay. So one vote for we don't trust David. Yeah, Larry?
Well, we've been having chapter after chapter of war and people getting killed and so forth. Now, here all of a sudden is inserted a chapter showing what a loving, kind, benevolent sort of king David is.
Uh-huh. So it seems well placed in the narrative.
But Jonathan was his good friend.
Yeah.
Going back to childhood, as young boys, they were good friends. I can see where he would want to show kindness for Jonathan's sake, since Jonathan was killed.
And he did make promises to Jonathan to take care of his family.
That's true.
Yeah.
He did.
So that is I hear you as a vote for, yeah, we can trust, like David's doing this honorably. We have maybe at least 2 votes for something's up here. Anyone else weighing in what might be going on with David? So keep a tally in your head. I'm gonna ask the same question at the end. There is some question. I think there is what the narrative says, which might be Sariah taking or doing a good job as press secretary, and then there's a sense that this actually may be David being David.
Okay.
Anyways, so there was a servant in the house of Saul named Ziba, and Ziba is summoned, because evidently Ziba would know who is who, and David asked the same question: is there anyone remaining in the house of Saul where I may show the kindness of God? Which is a slightly different question. Where do you see the difference between I may show kindness because of my love for Jonathan versus I may show the kindness of God? Why are those two very different?
Well, instead of David's own personal kindness, he's going to show how kind and benevolent his God is to others. So it's more who's doing the good deed. It's going through David, but is it his idea or God's idea to be so kind and benevolent?
Kindness of God.
Yeah. So part of this is Saul's house was theoretically damned by God. And so if David is just showing kindness because David wants to, theoretically, David could be going against the will of God and can get himself in trouble. If he is showing the kindness of God, that hints that David is an actor of God, but in step with God, where basically declaring Saul's house has been punished, we can be nice to them now. And so some of this is David by saying it this way, it implies that David is not incurring divine retribution just because he liked these people. At any rate, Ziba shares that there is a remaining son of Jonathan who is crippled in the feet. And a big hullabaloo has been made about this guy's crippled feet. Why does it matter that Jonathan's remaining son, the remaining son of the line of Saul, is crippled? Because it's important here. So why is it important that this guy can't walk?
Well, he can control him better.
Yeah, say more.
He's not going to, it would be hard for him to run away. I think also having him eat his meals at David's table is a way of controlling him. I am very suspicious of David. I could see him. He's got his eye on him. He does,
Yeah.
And it may be not just the boy, the man. It could also be any remaining supporters that he might have to cause some kind of rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah, Clay?
Yeah, I was going to say rebellion against having killed a bunch of other family members.
Other thoughts?
Well, the fact that he's apparently a cripple, or at least impaired, means that he's going to require some help. And that shows that he's fulfilling that idea of his pledge to Jonathan to take care of his family.
Right. So, I mean, there's a sense, like, if you are, especially in the ancient world, if you had a disability, it was truly disabling that this man cannot go out in the same way. Often disability was seen as divine punishment. We see this, there's a healing of Jesus where something has fallen on a man and his legs are broken, and his disciples ask him, did this happen because he sinned or his parents sinned? Yeah. And Jesus said, no, he is this way because of the glory of God, and he heals him. So like kind of throwing out this notion that if you have a disability, it's punishment for sin. But in this case, it actually kind of does fall into that trope where it is kind of seen that this man is crippled because of God's divine punishment.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means that this man will need more help to live
Mm-hmm.
because he can't necessarily support himself. He is like living off the kindness of people. And so by David bringing him into the royal court, there's a likelihood that he's going to get a better life than he ever would on his own. So yeah, B?
There's an interesting term. Now, I know that we have different versions of the words of the Bible here, but where Mephibosheth says, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's such a strange phrase.
So
Do we all have that? The dead dog?
yeah. So there's a few things going on here, or in that phrase. So first of all, it is very common when you go in front of a king or royalty that you, in a way, insulting yourself elevates the person in front of you. So it's that performative humbleness that you often see where it's kind of like, oh, you're paying it, who, me? You're paying attention to me? This, or in the, you'll see people do this sometimes when it's like, oh, that's a beautiful jacket. And they'll say, oh, this old thing. It's kind of that performative humbleness. And that often happens when people go in front of royalty. It's like, why do you pay attention to me, mere mortal? So there's a little bit of that. When talking about dogs, I think we covered this a few weeks ago. They're not thinking the cute little Labradors we have as house pets. Yes, people would some people might have dogs as pets. I mean, they are useful, but often when phrases like this are being said, they're talking about feral dogs. Dogs would just be loose and they are dangerous. They may have diseases, and if you're talking about a dead dog, you're definitely talking about something gross and diseased. And it's kind of a reference of like, why, like, lovely, beautiful king in your fancy palace, why are you paying attention to me in a way why are you paying attention to a deformed man who is the grandson of a dead king? Like you won. You won the battle, or you are now king. My family is essentially his entire family is dead. He is crippled. Why are you paying attention to me, someone who has the same status as a dead dog on the side of the road? So that's kind of the fuller comment that he's making. He is basically saying that he is a worthless human being and the king doesn't have to pay attention to him. So what do you all think with is this performative humbleness entirely, or do you think Mephibosheth is actually kind of shocked that King David is paying attention to him?
Well, I think he probably is a little surprised. Yeah.
Do you think he trusts David? No, we get a few heads that we.
He's going to be afraid of him, I would think. Yeah.
Does anybody in a warlike setting like this trust each other?
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
That may be another reason why he is kind of defacing himself in front of the king, is if he presents himself in a way that makes him look like a threat, his life is in danger. So by
Mhm.
intentionally humbling himself even further than he has to, it's kind of like saying, I'm not a threat, don't hurt me. And it does sound like he is afraid.
Mhm.
Especially because David's response is then, don't be afraid.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid. I will show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. I will restore to you all the lands of your grandfather,
Mhm.
Saul, and you yourself shall eat at my table always. So, what exactly is David promising here?
What, is he actually giving back Saul's entire kingdom as far
So,
as the land is concerned and so forth? That sounds like, you know, quite a big offer.
he is not giving the kingdom. He is doing the equivalent of, hey, I know that, like, don't be afraid. I'm going to give you your grandfather's bank account and stock holdings.
Okay,
If
okay.
you think about it, even like with the royal family in England, technically the royals rule over all of England, but they have personal assets.
Access, okay.
So King Saul had personal assets. He had plots of land that he himself owned, that he had probably people on that worked the land to cultivate or do all of those things. That would have helped support the palace itself.
Oh, okay.
And so David is giving the personal
Mhm.
holdings
Mhm.
of King Saul to him.
Ah, got it.
This is important for a very interesting reason. Is Mephibosheth the only living descendant of Saul?
Who is crippled in both feet. It says it again at the end.
Yes, crippled in both feet. But again, I ask, do you remember someone else who's still alive, who is related to Saul?
Oh, the daughter of Saul, that was one of
So,
his wives.
so yeah, Michelle, one of those two. So one of David's wives, she can't inherit land anyways, though. She's
No,
David's
okay.
property. But there's one more person who is still alive.
This Ziba has 15 sons, so, but Ziba, I think, is
He is a servant of Saul.
right.
We'll get to the dynamics there. So he is a servant technically, or like a administrator.
Hmm. Hmm.
Ooh, hold on. I want to make sure I have this correct. Abner.
I don't remember anybody.
Oh no, I lied. I got that wrong. I got it wrong. I thought the other king, the Ishbaal, one of Saul's younger sons, was still alive. I forgot. A raiding band killed him and then brought his head to David, and David wasn't happy. Okay. At first, I was thinking, like, if Ishbaal's still alive, then David actually took the inheritance and gave it to a crippled son. He did not. Okay, so Mish Mishbosheth is the only living relative of
Oh,
Saul. Okay,
okay.
never mind. Ignore the point I was trying to make there.
Mhm.
So to explain a few things that are going on that are a little bit like read between the lines context based. What the notes were saying here is that Ziba is being tasked with overseeing the land and the production of it. So while it is still technically in Mishbosheth's name, it is going to support Ziba and his family and his 15 sons and 20 servants, which is actually like a huge family. But the implication seems to be that David himself is taking care of Mephibosheth out of his own pocket. So that is, they are kind of being separated, but at the same time, Mephibosheth in name owns the lands of Saul, which are being administered by Ziba. So it's a little bit unclear, but that's what the notes were saying. But they are technically being restored as close as possible to Saul's family and Saul's house.
And let's see, was he also one writing things down or not? No.
No, Ziba seems to be just
Okay.
what we talked about before of there being a steward, which is kind of the number two in the household that administers things on behalf of the Lord.
Okay.
Ziba is likely the steward of the property. So like kind of like underneath the Lord, kind of a servant, but of a very high rank.
You know, this chapter ends with, so lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet. That has been repeated over and over. It's like you don't have to be afraid of him because he's lame. This is being a good guy here, taking care of him.
So that brings us back to one of the initial questions. I think we have all the details here. Mephibosheth also has a son. His name's Micah. Micah, I think may come back around. Micah has 4 sons. So the line of Saul is actually not entirely squashed. So it is interesting that the story again and again repeats Mephibosheth is lame. Mephibosheth is crippled. Mephibosheth can't walk. So do we think David is being kind, or do we think David is being strategic? And the answer can be both. And I want to hear your arguments on what's going on here. Is David being kind or strategic, or both?
Well, it probably works very well for him because he can look like he's being kind, or he can even be kind. But it's also strategic, and so that he has his eye on him. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of both, I think. I mean, David is fulfilling a promise he made to Jonathan. And it just so happens it also is probably going to work to his great advantage, as well, so he's getting double payment for one good deed.
The thing that is also interesting that comes to mind is the story took time out of previously in chapter 4 to mention how Mephibosheth's feet were broken, when it made no sense in context. It was just kind of dropped into the story when Ishbaal is being attacked and is about to be killed. It's like, oh yeah, also there was Mephibosheth. He was dropped as a child. His feet were crippled. Just to let you know, his feet have been crippled since infanthood. Why did the text take time out of the story to establish that then? Why is it different if Mephibosheth was crippled as an adult?
Well, he's not a very dangerous person to have around, because think of the storyline. I mean, there's so much fighting. You have to be able to ride a horse, and you have to be able to fight and all of that to exist in David's world.
Right. So this is very much, for David, this is a non-threatening person. This is not someone who's going to rise up and create a revolution. He can't really ride a horse. He can't do any of the things that would make him, or like people don't want to follow a king that is crippled, because that's not a good image for the other nations. So you're right, this is a non-threatening person. But I still put forward, why is it important that he was crippled from childhood and not crippled recently?
That means that David didn't have anything to do with it.
Exactly. Once again, this is the story going, David didn't do it. David didn't break his legs. David may act like a mob boss, but he didn't break this guy's legs. And that is very important that David did not, because theoretically you could, I sometimes wonder if the text is responding to rumors, because you could see the rumors if Jonathan's son is all of a sudden eating at David's table and he has bad legs, it's like, oh yeah, I heard David did that. Like he wanted to honor his friend Jonathan, but the man was too much of a threat, so he broke his legs and then keeps him at his table as a pet. You could see the courtly rumors, can't you? So it wants to establish, no, David, once again, David was not in the battle where King Saul died. David was not responsible for the death of these people. Look, David killed the guys who killed them. David's not, like, the text is very concerned with what David's not responsible for. Yeah. He's like, it's not my fault. I'm trying. He's at my table. But also, there seems to be an accusation kind of in the text that this was a form of house arrest for Mephibosheth. That he is always at King David's table. Can he really leave? Can he leave if he wants to? Because if he's able to leave, he could be able to talk to people, and maybe Mephibosheth could start the rumor that David broke his legs and, hey, you should avenge me and my family. So the text is doing a lot to try to wash David's image, whether or not this is one where we don't really, I mean, this is far enough away. We don't know what is rumor, what is counter rumor, what is PR, and what is actually David trying his best, and the rumor mill is doing what the rumor mill does. So, for better or for worse, that's actually all that I have for you all today before we get started on David and Bathsheba, which is, I believe, what we have for next time. So, which is when David does things so bad he can't PR campaign his way out of this one. It is recorded in the text of David doing wrong. So at this point,
comment that I want to make to you. You know, I always had an image that this is this is Old Testament. It's hundreds, thousands of years ago. The population was very scarce, really, wasn't it? Very thin. And yet I look at the number of people who get killed, 20,000 here, 30,000 there. You know, 3/4 of the men get killed in these, I mean, maybe of the total, I don't know, but I don't know. So,
well, since we have time, let me see if I can get some population numbers. Here we go. Whoop. Let me set this up so I can keep you all on screen.
Yeah, 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt, you know.
So the first thing I will say is their relationship to numbers is not our relationship with numbers. Our modern perception, it is like we want accurate numbers down to, like, even if there's thousands, we often calculate it down to the tens, and like we want it to be realistic. In this, the farther away from Genesis we get, in some ways, is the more the more trustworthy the numbers get, but I'm not going to call them trustworthy because they're more like a gesture at accuracy, where sometimes it very much feels like they pull a number out to mean a lot of people died. But there's different orders of magnitude. But we also know that numbers tend to inflate over time. One of the things that's often talked about is the historian Josephus. Josephus was alive after the time of Jesus when the Jewish-Roman wars were happening. He was basically a captive of the Roman army, and he went by and he was taking notes as the Jewish people were being slaughtered. And so he has numbers for all of that. And we know he's a liar. We know for a fact that he way overinflated the numbers of people that died, because Josephus had number one, we can cross-reference his numbers. Number two, he also had an agenda. He made it seem like a lot more people died than actually died, which you can't blame the guy. And so we can kind of see from cross-referencing other stories, we can start to see how numbers inflate. So don't think that these numbers are accurate. They are a gesture. If they are a big number, you're meant to feel big numbers of people died. Let's see. Where, oh goodness. I got a quick number here. What was it? Okay, we can extrapolate from the population of David's time. His census was one of the most complete in the entire country. Judah numbered 500,000 people and Israel numbered 800,000 people. So together,
Oh,
so that is using the Bible as a source for numbers. I'm not sure if I trust, once again, I'm not sure if I trust it. I would be more willing to trust archaeologists if there was, I am not seeing something straight off the bat. The other thing to keep in mind is when population, when you're talking about population, there's two types of graphs you get. In animal populations, you often see what is called an S curve, where you have your baseline population and something will happen and you see exponential growth until you hit basically the limit of resources, and then that's when a population will peak and either maintain or drop, depending. And that's called an S curve. The human population has never really reached the upper limit because every time we reach a limit, technology makes it so that we can surpass that limit. So what is often said is a J curve of population, because right now the human population has only ever been in the J part of the S curve. I know this is technical, bear with me. What will often make a certain population start exponentially growing is not birth rates, but death rates. When death rates drop is when you get that curve of the J curve. And that mostly deals with infant mortality and longevity. Like how long does someone live? And what you will find is there's a lot of people, or a lot of infants that die, which means people have a lot of children, but only a certain amount make it to adulthood. That is honestly often the biggest indicator of population growth, is how many children live. So they're having infinitely more children than we are. Their death rates are also very high, which means population turnover is very quick. So while they have lots of people dying, they also have a lot of people being born, and it won't be until death rates drop off that populations grow really quickly. So this is one where you may have a lot of kids by the time you're 40. And even if you die at 40, you're going to have many more kids than anyone today. But also, men go to war. And so lots of men die, but then you're also creating a lot at home. And so the population dynamics are different, I guess is what I'm saying. So yes, lots of people can die, but if you are starting having kids younger and you're having much more, there's in some ways it is more devastating for countries that have lower birth rates and lower death rates to lose people than places where you start having kids younger, you have a lot, but you lose a lot. Did that make sense?
Mhm.
More or less?
Mhm.
Okay. So, yes, that's all to say. Don't trust the numbers of the people who died. They are abstract senses. Like, even today, thinking about like, what does 1,000 t-shirts look like? I have no idea. Like how big a stack 1,000 t-shirts is. I can imagine a stack of like 10 t-shirts. And so if people just dropped off a bunch of t-shirts in a pile in my office, I'm going to take an estimate about how many are there. I'm not going to go and count them. And so they're not counting people in that way. They're looking at a battlefield and getting a general sense of how many people died. Yeah, Larry?
Talking about trusting the numbers in the Bible, you've got all these people living to be 175 and 190, it sort of makes you wonder, really?
Right. Those, either they had a different way to count,
Yeah.
which is one theory, that they counted in a different way. Like, are they counting the seasons that someone's alive? Are they counting something else? We don't know, but yeah, people weren't living to 200 years old.
No.
That is legend. So, any other thoughts for today, or just stray thoughts that you've been holding on to and not knowing when's a good time to ask? Anything?
I'm looking forward to David and Bathsheba.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I know we've been kind of waiting for this one for a long time.
Right.
Well, we'll have to see if the movie is on Netflix. I think it has Susan Hayward in it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, I guess if no other comments and we're just eager for David and Bathsheba, we'll end a little bit early. We'll probably take a little extra time next week, because it is a full story.
Okay.
But with that, shall we pray ourselves out for today?
Yeah.
All right. Let us pray. Loving God, there is often times where the good thing is beneficial to us, where it's easy to do the right thing because the right thing makes us look good and the right thing has some other benefits. Help us to do the right thing even when that's not the case. Help us to do the right thing even when it costs a little bit more money to do it. Help us to do the right thing even when it's not in our own personal best interest, but maybe in the best interest of the community and society. Help us to understand the difference between what is personally painful and what is overall good. Because God, it is so easy to get stuck in our own lives and our own problems and our own situations where it's hard to see the bigger picture. And it's sometimes hard to choose the right thing when we know it's gonna hurt. So guide us this week and in the weeks to come to find the best solutions in every case. Give us discernment and wisdom that comes from you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
Thank you.
See you all next week.
Okay, okay.